Hello, my loves, and welcome to the long-awaited second episode of Investigation Sims. I apologize that it took me so long to get the second episode of this series out to you. I have not abandoned it. It's just that this kind of work takes so long to do all the research and make sure that I'm getting all the correct information. It just takes a really long time. So I apologize, but I'm really excited about the case we're going to talk about today because it completely left me baffled. There are a few disclaimers I need to go over before we start talking about this case. Disclaimer number 1, I do have dogs barking in the background, so apologies if you hear them throughout the video. Disclaimer number 2, the Sims I'm creating in this video have nothing to do with the case that we're going to be talking about today, and they are not made to resemble any of the people talked about in this case. Disclaimer number 3, unfortunately, we are going to be talking about the deaths of small children, so if that's not something that you're comfortable with, I totally understand. Please feel free to check out some of my other content and you can just skip this one. With all that being said, let's hop in. George and Jeannie Sodder and their 10 children lived in Fayetteville, West Virginia in 1945. The oldest of the 10 Sodder children was actually away during the time that this incident happened. He was fighting in the war at the time, so he is one of the children that fortunately did survive this incident. On Christmas Day, 1945, at around 1 o'clock in the morning, a fire started in the Sodder family home. Unfortunately, George and Jeannie Sodder would lose 5 of their 10 children that night. So let's talk about the night that the Sodder children disappeared. Marion, the 17-year-old Sodder child, bought some toys for her younger siblings from the dime store, so the younger kids were kind of playing with those, and at about 10 o'clock, the kids asked George and Jeannie, their parents, if they could stay up, and their parents said, yeah, that's fine, as long as Louis and Maurice closed the chicken coop and fed the cows. So the boys went out, did their chores, and apparently John, who was 23, and George Jr., who was about 16, had already gone to bed up in the attic of the house. Jeannie, the Sodder children's mother, woke up around midnight when she got a phone call. She answered the phone and she said she could hear like glasses clinking in the background. Apparently she heard a woman speaking and asking for somebody who didn't live there. When Jeannie told her that, the person she was looking for didn't live there, she laughed and hung up the phone. So Jeannie noticed that her kids weren't in the living room anymore at this time, but the lights had been left on and the door was unlocked, which seemed kind of strange because normally her kids were pretty good about turning off the lights, locking doors, all of that kind of stuff before going to bed. So she went ahead and turned off the lights, locked the doors, and then she went back to bed. About a half an hour later, she woke up again because she heard something make some sort of loud bang on the roof. As she said, it sounded almost like a rubber ball, and then it rolled off the roof and hit the ground. She laid there for a few minutes trying to see if it would happen again, but it didn't. She didn't get up to see what it might have been. She just ended up falling back asleep, and then around 1 a.m. Jeannie woke up a third time to the smell of smoke. Jeannie immediately woke up George and then ran downstairs. Marion, their 17-year-old, was asleep on the couch. Jeannie woke her up and told her to get her 2-year-old, Sylvia, and get her out of the house. Apparently then Jeannie started yelling, and the 2 boys, John and George Jr., came down out of the attic, but their hair was singed by the flames. John later stated that he shouted into the next room and heard his siblings answer him, but I guess his story kind of changed because soon after the fire, he said that he actually went in and shook them awake, which is very different from just yelling at them from the next room. George Jr. and John tried to help their father fight the fire, so once they were outside, and they realized that none of the children had come down the stairs and the fire was only getting worse, they really started to panic. The kids were not at the windows. They couldn't hear any screaming or anything coming from the house. So then they start looking to rescue the kids. They tried to get back into the house by climbing up a wall and breaking through one of the windows on the side of the house, which unfortunately did leave George with a pretty large gash in his arm. The first floor was basically completely engulfed in flames. So there was no way they were going to get in by the first floor. But George had a ladder that was always leaning on one side of his house. I guess he always put it in the same place. He was very adamant that it was always in the same place. But that ladder was not there. George then decided that he was going to take one of the coal trucks that he used for his business and park it up next to the house, and they were going to climb on top of the truck to reach the second floor. He had driven both of these trucks the previous day, but neither one of the trucks would start. At this point, Marianne ran over to a neighbor's house to use their phone to call the fire department, but she couldn't get through to the fire department for some reason. So one of the neighbors drove around to try to find the fire chief, F.J. Morris, and she was finally able to reach him and told him that there were children trapped in the burning Sodder home. So keep in mind, this is all happening at about 1 a.m. The fire department was located about 2 miles away from the Sodder home, but nobody from the fire department actually arrived at the Sodder home to help until sometime between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. that morning. All they could do was basically throw some water on the cinders because the house had burned to the ground at that point. Now, this is very important. That house burned to the ground in less than an hour. The fire department was 2 miles away from the Sodder home, and it took them hours to show up. Apparently, the police chief said that the fire was an accident caused by some sort of faulty wiring, even though George said that he had checked the wiring weeks before and they had never had any problems with their electricity in their home. So the next part of this is kind of important, is the fact that it was Christmas Day when this all happened. So everybody was kind of in a rush to get back to their families. They didn't want to spend time doing a thorough search, it sounds like. And they basically said the kids are a lost cause. So by about 10 o'clock in the morning, the fire chief said, well, they must have just been cremated, and kind of moved on about his business. Now, there were some strange things that happened a few months before the Sodder home caught on fire, one of which an insurance salesman, I guess, told George that his house was going to go up in smoke and his children were going to be destroyed because he had been making some kind of negative remarks about Mussolini. George had immigrated here from Italy and was openly critical of Mussolini. And so there was a large Italian immigrant population in their area at the time, and people didn't take very kindly to that, apparently. They also found out that the telephone wires to the house were cut, and they actually found the man that said he cut the telephone wires, but he never went to trial. They never did anything about it. They just kind of let it go, I guess. I have no idea. The ladder that I mentioned earlier that George said he always kept in the exact same place was found 75 feet from where it usually was, down a little embankment. And they think that this ladder was probably what was used to cut the telephone wires, because the telephone wires were actually cut 14 feet from the ground and 2 feet from a telephone pole, which is kind of hard to get to without a ladder. Now, believe it or not, things get even more weird. 2 years after the fire, the fire chief Morris claimed that he actually did find evidence that the Sodder children died in the house fire. He says he found a heart, which he buried in a dynamite box on the property. Now, this is the same man that said that the children were cremated in the fire. So how are we finding full hearts, but not even bones? I don't know, you guys. This is so crazy. The fire chief eventually was kind of convinced to show the family where he buried one of their children's hearts on the property. So eventually he did. He brought them to the place where he said he buried the heart. They dug it up, and there was actually a box there. So they took the box to the funeral home, and when they opened the box, they said it looked like a fresh beef liver. What? So when they confronted Morris about this, he said, yeah, I made it up. but just because I wanted them to stop looking for their children. What do you mean? So the Sodders actually became convinced that because there were no bodies found inside the house after the house fire, that their children actually did not perish in the house fire that night. They believed wholeheartedly that their children had actually been kidnapped, and they believed this so strongly they actually paid to put up a billboard, and they were trying to get people to call in tips to help them find their children. It was reported then that Jeannie had read an article about a similar house fire that happened after she lost her children, and 7 people apparently perished in this house fire. And they said that all 7 skeletons were found, even that of a 3-month-old baby. And so she apparently started conducting some kind of experiments where she would burn animals, whether it be chicken, cow, pigs, their bones. And no matter what she did, apparently the bones always stayed. And so she talked to an employee at a crematorium, and they told her that even after bodies are burned at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 hours, there are still bones left over sometimes. Now, that's important to note because number one, the Sodder house did not burn at 2,000 degrees. There's no way that this house reached 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And number two, it took less than an hour for the Sodder home to burn down. It only took about 45 minutes for that home to be reduced to nothing but ashes. The Sodders were so convinced that they did not lose their children in this fire that they actually tried to enlist the help of the FBI. They got a letter back from J. Edgar Hoover, and he said, although I would like to be of service, the matter related appears to be of local character and does not come within the investigative jurisdiction of this bureau. The police and the fire department basically refused to let the FBI help. After the fire, there were numerous reports of sightings of the Sodder children. For example, in 1953, Ida Crutchfield was operating a motel in Charleston and said she had seen the children a week after they had disappeared. So a week after the fire. She'd only seen pictures of the missing kids 2 years after the fire, though. She said she recalled the 2 men that she saw the children with, and said that they were kind of hostile. They weren't very nice. She said that they came in with the kids and she served them breakfast. In 1968, which was about 20 years after the Sodder home burned down and the children disappeared, Jeannie received an envelope that was postmarked from Kentucky, and it didn't have any kind of return address, but inside the envelope was a picture of a man with the same dark eyes that her children had, and on the back it said, Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie. And I don't know what this next word is, but I think it's I think it's LLIL, boys, and then A90132 or 35, most of which meant nothing to the Sodder family. They didn't have any sons named Frankie or anything like that, so it was just kind of odd. But apparently Jeannie was, convinced that this was her son. The 90132 is actually the zip code of Palermo, Sicily. I don't know how to pronounce that, but people think that because of that, the children were taken by the mafia and then placed with family members of the, people that were in the mafia, because George had left Italy to escape the mafia and the mafia's influence. But George never spoke on why he left Italy, so that's really speculation. So there are a few theories about what actually happened to the Sodder children that night. One of the more popular ones is that those people that were upset at George for speaking ill of Mussolini lashed out at the Sodders to punish George for being critical of Mussolini, even though Mussolini had already been executed at that point in time. But they say they snuck into the house, took the children, and then set the house on fire, hoping to kill the rest of the family. Now, why they wouldn't just kill the entire family or set the house on fire with the entire family inside, I don't know. Some people say the kids were sold into an orphanage, but again, this is complete speculation. Nobody really has any kind of evidence to back up this claim. This is just one of the things people talk about. So this is the last thing that we're going to talk about because, believe it or not, things get even crazier. One of the sources I found said that the fire marshal told the Sodder family to leave the home as it was, and the authorities would come back later to finish the inspection and do a more thorough search because this happened on Christmas Day. But apparently, they're stating that George, the father, ignored this order and less than a week later pushed 4 or 5 feet of dirt onto what was left of his house, planted flowers, and basically erected a shrine to his lost children. So for the rest of their life, George and Jeannie Sodder never gave up hope that they would find their missing children. George traveled the country tracking down rumors about his kids, and unfortunately he died in 1969. Jeannie, his wife, actually died 20 years later. And she reportedly wore black up until her final days. After Jeannie died, the billboard that they had erected came down. At the end of the day, nobody can really say for sure what happened to the Sodder children. There's no kind of physical evidence, and there's really nothing that anyone can say that can be proven at this point. It's been so long, any evidence that was there is now surely gone, and it sounds like there may have been some cover-up happening in the local law enforcement, but that's, again, speculation. Nobody really knows. So for some people, they say the children died that night in 1945, but for the Sodder family and some of their neighbors, who say that they have seen the children since the fire, they believe that the Sodder children could still be out there somewhere. So I don't know, you guys, this one was a little bit crazy, but I am so blown away at all of the insane things that people said and did throughout this case. And this is a very brief overview, okay? There is no way I could go into all the nitty gritty of this case because there is so much, but I will have links to more thorough reviews of this case down in the description if you would like to know a little bit more about it. But I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, leave a like and a comment down below. If there is a true crime case that you would like me to do an overview of, please leave it in a comment. I'm totally down for suggestions because I would like to do more of this. It just takes a little bit of time to do all the research I need to do. So again, I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much for coming to hang out with me today. If you are new to the channel, please make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and I will see you all next time. Bye, guys.